I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this Word in Your Ear podcast, videocast thing for which there is no name. Mark Ellen and I have been creating in this line since 2007. And if any of it has met with your approval, then please click to subscribe because it helps. Leave a comment because we like to hear from you, and maybe even consider becoming a Patreon supporter because then, well, you'll be one of us. Visit patreon.com/wordinyourear for details.
Welcome to this and a memoir that perfectly captures the thrill and the texture of life of being in a band in London in the late 1970s in fantastic detail. Their attempts to storm Radio 1, the time U2 supported them, the wearing of mauve twinkling nylon net ballet skirts. It's so nostalgic and it's so of the moment. And the book's called Teenage Daydream, We Are the Girls Who Play in a Band, by the bassist and singer of Dolly Mixture, Debsey Wykes. Debsey, it's really nice to see you. Excellent. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. It's lovely to be here.
Very good. A lot of this book is based on diary extracts, which is just riveting. So did you always keep a diary?
Yeah, since I was 13, because when I was at actually 12, because at my first secondary school, we all read Anne Frank's diary. So almost the whole class started a diary, dear so-and-so, you know. Yeah. And I just kept it up because I moved schools when I was 13 and I suddenly needed my diary.
Well, that's right. So was it painful going back and looking at terribly embarrassing moments where you've kind of developed affections for boys, etc.?
Oh, it's absolutely hideous. Honestly, it really is awful. It's just, I mean, I've almost thrown them all across the room, just sort of like, what a prat, you know. I mean, it's just, there's so much that didn't go into the book, obviously.
Well, I speak as somebody with who had 3 elder sisters, and one of them burnt her diaries. So embarrassed about what an absolute pillock she'd been, you know. But did you ever think, when keeping them and when you started the band, did you ever think there might be a book in this someday? I imagine probably not, but I mean, you know, did you think I ought to make a record of this? Because you never know.
I don't think I seriously thought that anyone would want to publish a book, but I think there was probably a need to want to be an author or sort of thing, or to write a book, and the nearest I could get to that was to fill up notebooks with my writing, if you know what I mean.
I do.
So I got the impression that I'd written a book.
Yeah.
Volumes
even. Of it. Exactly. Well, you talk about in great detail about growing up in Cambridge and your wonderful details. I love the diary. There's one bit where you talk about the lead singer of The Only Ones having fantastic legs and glittery plimsolls. You know, that's the kind of detail you want. But anyway, you're talking about being at home and you talk about your teak laminated music centre. And I can remember, well, that really brings back the time. But what sort of things were playing at home on the teak laminated music centre? Can you remember?
Well, we all sat and listened individually, you see, because we had a pair of big clunky sort of olive-coloured headphones. So I would sit there, obviously, and at first, before sort of punk and stuff, I would listen to Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin.
No
and
shame there.
Deep Purple and stuff going, you know, so really pushing them into my head, you know. And my dad would sit and listen to Beethoven and Ella Fitzgerald. And my brother, I don't know, probably a bit of Led Zeppelin, but listening to it intellectually, right? You know, sort of, oh, look what they're doing there, sort of thing.
That's a good phrase. Listening to it intellectually. It's sort of a male thing. Oh, you wouldn't understand because this is in a kind of 7-8 time signature. You know. What about what posters were on the bedroom wall? I mean, we're going to get on to David Essex later on because you record with him, which is a brilliant story. But was that the kind of thing we're talking about?
Yeah. Well, when I was 12, when I was 11, 12, and I lived in London, I had some David Cassidy, and I had a little handful of Bowie pictures because I was a bit embarrassed about showing my family that I liked him because he was so strange and otherworldly and made me feel very strange. Whereas David Cassidy was sort of just cheeky and
conventional, wasn't he?
Yes, sort of normal.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Cambridge, it turned into David Bowie went back up again, and the Rollers came along, Bay City Rollers. So it was them.
Did you have a favourite roller?
Yes, Alan Longmuir, the bass player.
Oh yeah.
The oldest one, the mature one.
Did you have the full rollers, threads? Did you have the tartan?
I didn't actually. I just had a scarf and a hat. That's all.
That's enough. Yeah. But when you talk about Led Zeppelin back there, you said, I think there's a point in the book where you said, I was listening to Physical Graffiti and I thought, I'm going to get a guitar and be in a group. So what was it about that, particularly Led Zeppelin, that made you feel that?
Oh, it's really strange how it just sort of worked so slowly. My sort of like my need to suddenly play the electric guitar. I think everybody always had a dream of being in a pop group, just sort of growing up watching Top of the Pops and things. And it's just because it was so loud. And I think at some point in your life, all you want to do is scream, sort of, in a way, because I don't know. I probably said it in the book, but I always felt very inarticulate, and I just wanted to go ah. And at that point, the only thing I could focus on was I think I always liked guitarists as well, but there's something about the guitar. It's just sort of like it just looks amazing, and they make such an incredibly loud noise, and they're sort of overpowering and take over.
But absolutely. But there's obviously a kind of transformation that takes place. You start going to see punk gigs. There's one time you go and see the Stranglers, and the high point, as recorded in your diary, is that J.J. Burnel puts his boot on your head.
I know.
It's fantastic. What a moment. You come out of that and think, that's a result, isn't it?
I know. Don't wash your head for ages.
But I obviously there was a change going on. Obviously, it was musically, because you also said at one point you wanted to look like Stevie Nicks, and then suddenly you kind of changed the way you want to look. So what caused that? It was just basically punk rock, I imagine.
I think so. I think it was sort of like, I think we were drifting between looking sort of, I don't know, just totally messy. In sort of 1977, we had sort of like our satin and silk sort of phase, and me and Hester, who was my sort of like co-dresser and best friend at that time, we're drifting into wearing sort of weird flouncy things and old petticoats, and I think that summer when Stevie Nicks was on the television singing, I just thought she's the prettiest thing I've ever seen, and her beautiful voice, and I think because her arms are doing this, and I don't know, ethereal, I suppose, as well.
Ethereal, floating.
Yes. I just thought
she wafted, didn't she?
With that, and that voice, gee. I just wanted to sort of be that, but then sort of life takes over, and you're never going to look like Stevie Nicks, sort of thing. So I had to one day, thank God I couldn't afford the surgery, but I don't know, actually it wouldn't be bad thinking about it.
Oh God, don't go there.
No.
But no, when you formed the group, you and the other two, I mean, you make a point of the fact you really couldn't play. And I think that's really interesting, because so much of being in a group before then was about kind of, well, you've got to have the confidence to get up and play, but there's an element of, well, look at me, I'm playing the guitar and I'm quite good at the guitar or whatever. So you didn't have that. All you had was personality and self-belief, really, didn't you?
Yeah, of absolute.
What gave you the confidence to get up and play when you could barely play an instrument, any of you?
I think it's the times. I think everyone at school practically, or all the boys, were in bands, you know. And I mean, they were. I don't know whether they were any good or not, but it just seemed such a sort of amazing thing to do, and I think just the times, it was free. There was a real freedom at that point, and when just. Yeah, it's just like having the idea. It just suddenly seemed so easy to turn it into a reality, especially when your friend down the road has a brother who's in a band, and she rings up one day and says there's some equipment round at the house. So we just ran round and picked it all up.
It's so excitingly described in the book. It's funny. In 1982, I stood in for John Peel. John Peel had gone on holiday or something, and I was doing old bits on Radio 1, and I stood in for him for a couple of weeks. So I read all the mail from all the bands coming in and played a lot of their records. You know, this was a bit after you guys had taken off, but it struck me that there was just it was a time when bands' ambitions were quite modest, really. I mean, a lot of people just formed a band, and what they really wanted to do was be on the John Peel show. And once they'd been on the John Peel show, they'd kind of cracked it. They didn't expect any more. How did you feel? What was the scale of your ambition?
Top of the Pops was ours, definitely. Yeah. John Peel on the way, but Top of the Pops was definitely where we wanted to be. Yeah.
And when you kind of started and you've got your manager, you know, making calls from phone boxes, the whole thing's so analog and funny now. A lot of what you had to do was to go and just promote yourselves. You know, you take a single in to see Kid Jensen at Radio 1. And again, it reminded me that bands tended to be such big personalities then, because, you know, so much of it was about how you performed on radio, how you performed in the press, how you impressed the DJs you met, how you impressed other bands, wasn't it? And so that was a big part of what was involved, was just being a kind of effervescent personality, wasn't it?
I think it's sort of it's very old fashioned. I think it's also sort of that old fashioned showbiz from sort of like the olden days.
Yeah.
That sort of like. Sort of the middle of the century onwards. I think it's sort of like this is sort of like, you got to get yourself out there, you know, sort of like if you nab somebody, they might give you a chance, sort of thing. And I don't think that, I'm sure that doesn't happen anymore, but you know, everything sort of has to be done the right way, I suppose. But back then, yeah, you had to be active, proactive.
Yeah, you did. If you met a DJ, you would want to make an impression on them that they could then, it would give them some kind of editorial if they played your record. They said, well, I met these girls in a club and they were really funny and they said this, they did that, and this is what they were wearing and whatever. And you've kind of got some kind of take on it. And all of that's kind of disappeared now, I think. Really important.
Yes.
And it's so interesting, all your support slots, because I don't think you even had a record out and you were playing support on the Undertones tour, I think the Killjoys, the Kevin Rowland's old group, Madness, wasn't it? I mean, and how did you get those? Just because these guys met you and just offered you a support, or?
Yes, sort of. It's basically, we was incredibly lucky because every time we sort of almost went up to somebody, or they came and saw us play, it seemed at some point, that they would just offer us something. I mean, we never had to pay anybody to play on a tour, which I think started to come in where record companies had to sort of pay thousands to get their band onto a big support tour. But we actually, you know, we were just asked. And I think that just happened then as well, if you were lucky.
If you were lucky.
Yeah.
One of the other nostalgic elements of the book is what crowds were like, and you describe the violence of skinheads in the audience, and B, I think you were supporting Bad Manners or something. You talk about a football riot, lots of rival fans somehow meet in the audience, you know, and there's this massive fight and you have to hide in the dressing room and all that. I mean, that was a big part, wasn't it, of going to gigs? They were quite violent, weren't they?
Yes, and in fact, sometimes it was easier being the band because like somebody could sort things out, if it really came to it. Because I went to a lot of gigs, as a punter, and we'd have to sort of, sometimes you just have to leave because the whole place would just explode. So something was always happening. It was just sort of par for the course that something could easily kick off. But yeah, that particular football riot in Nottingham, Rock City, I believe. Yeah, we were just shut in downstairs with this sort of fire alarm just going for hours, and we're just sort of sitting there. When is this going to end? Bad Manners' equipment was all destroyed, so they had to hire stuff for the rest of the tour. And I think the road manager was just sort of getting in there as well, just protecting his flock and the equipment.
But that must have been so exciting. I mean, the idea the next day you've got this fantastic story to tell. I mean, it sounds kind of scary. It must have been thrilling, mustn't it? Being in the middle of all that.
I don't. It's more fun looking back on it. I think you sort of like wake up the next day and sort of, okay, where are we going today?
Yeah.
Sort of. It's much more matter of fact. Sort of say, oh dear, have they got to hire equipment? Oh dear, and then you just carry on, sort of thing. And then you sort of get home a couple of weeks later and sort of feel a bit exhausted, and your family don't understand. And you can't tell them why you're exhausted.
No, they'd have no understanding of the world you were in at all, really.
No, they just couldn't. They just sort of like, what are you making a fuss about, sort of thing. You're lucky. You go off and do all this stuff.
Yeah, don't moan about it. I mentioned at the beginning that the fact that U2 supported you, which is just an extraordinary thing when you think about it. I can't remember what club was it? The Moonlight or something? Where were you? Which club was it?
Yeah, it was their first two British London dates. It was the Moonlight Club was the first one, and we missed them that night because we did that sort of classic headlining band wandering off until it's time for you to play. So we went off for a cup of tea, and sort of got back to the dressing room and said, "Oh, how did it go?" sort of thing, and sort of feeling a bit like a prat, sort of being in that position, and then watched them the next time, probably a few nights later at the Rock Garden. Suddenly sort of, oh, this is quite impressive. It was a bit sort of, ooh. They had something about them.
I was going to say, was there any suggestion that they might go on to some kind of greatness?
You knew that they'd do well, I think. And not that blooming well, but yeah, it
must have been strange watching their ascent afterwards and thinking that was the group that supported us.
Just annoying. Yeah,
that's very honest.
Just watched them sort of out the corner of my eye.
Yeah. The other person who features quite a lot early on is John Peel. I was just thinking what an extraordinarily important person that was. He was in that sphere of groups like yours, just trying to get started, and without his patronage, because you played a John Peel session. I think you met him, didn't you? Didn't he say he was on tour and he said he was going to come and see you or something?
We did. He came to Cambridge and we had tea with him because he came to visit our friends, the Users.
Oh yeah.
Their first record was sort of one of his favourites, and he just dropped in for about 20 minutes, and we had a cup of tea and told him about us. And he just rang up and said, would you like to do this road show? So we did it. He liked us, asked us to do another, and then asked us to do a session. And then he really liked us, but his producer, John Walters, didn't. So we never got a repeat. We were the only band, I think, who didn't get a repeat session.
Why did Walters not like you? Had you got any idea?
Well, one of the other two members of Dolly Mixture remember it as him saying something like they're like a cross between the Slits and the Nolans. And I think the Nolans aspect was probably the killer.
You would imagine that would be the one, not the Slits. But then again, a cross between the Slits and the Nolans is a brilliantly original position to take up.
I think it sounds fantastic.
It does. It does. That you describe Peel, I think, as being like a kind of a friendly uncle, in his Marks and Spencer's sweater and jeans. It's very funny. And the other thing was the recording the Peel session in your diary. Your main memory is roast beef and Yorkshire pudding in the canteen, 27p.
Well, I was always hungry. This is the awful thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it just everywhere I went, I was starving. Apart from that, yes, it was an extraordinary experience. Having filled up with roast beef and then recorded for 12 hours or whatever.
And what was it like when you listened to that? Because I doing that show and playing and repeating sessions and playing sessions and just playing new records by people who'd sent them in, you then get a postcard 2 days later saying how unbelievably thrilling it was. They were all gathered around the radio and listened. I'm sure you did the same. It must have been extraordinary to be on national radio because it had a really big audience, that show. And it had about, I think it was 2.25 million.
Blimey, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, it was the most thrilling thing that had ever happened. It was incredible, and we couldn't sit down. We were just so excited. So we just stood the whole of the 2 hours, just sort of round this, the music centre, just thrilled. And it was unearthly hearing the music. It was just unbelievable sound. And he just sounded so amused by it. Every time one of our songs ended, he said, "Oh, and that was Dolly Mixture." sort of like, what on earth is this?
Unless I'm entirely mistaken, I'm getting echoes of the Shangri-Las there. So the 60s pop echoes to be applauded. He was fantastic. It was funny, that program, because it went out all over Europe. It had a very strong signal that went out all over Europe, and so and also it was in stereo, and which was an irony in itself, because most of the groups you were playing were kind of resolutely mono DIY bands.
Oh yes,
yeah. So there were people listening in, they had lots of listeners in Holland certainly, and northern France and Germany. It was so funny. I love the idea that they wanted stereo radio, so they're the kind of people who were possibly used to Dire Straits or whatever, and they were getting Dolly Mixture at 11 o'clock at night.
I know, because he always played Disque du Crépuscule.
That's right.
He always played things off that label. That's my biggest memory. Anyway.
Yeah. There's another big moment in the book which really interested me, actually, was the idea that you first appear in the power of the music press, also your first reviews in Record Mirror and how important that was. But a journalist called Deanne Pearson, who I worked with at the NME, actually comes along and interviews you. And you kind of think, oh, she reviewed you, didn't she, I think? And you're thinking, well, this is great, That's an element of thinking, well, the sisterhood, she's going to be so pleased. NME don't have many girl writers, and she's come along to this. And then she wrote this really withering, kind of really scornful review, didn't she?
She wrote it was a full page, which we were so excited because a woman had come to see us play for the first time to review it, and we sought her out and sort of said, "What did you think?" And she just sort of went, "I hated it."
Oh, she did actually say that to you?
Yes, she did, and then she sat down.
I quite admire her for that, because actually it would have been very easy to say, "Yeah, really great, good luck with the single," then go away and write this bile,
Oh no, well, she did an interview with us, so she told us everything that she thought about us, which was just.
She interviewed you afterwards.
Yeah,
oh, right.
She dressed us down like nobody's business. And when the page, it was a full page article with a picture of us at the top, sort of all like laughing. So we looked the most ridiculous we could, sort of with our mouths wide open and just sort of like, ha! And sugary sweets cause youth decay, sort of big headlines. And then the rest of the page was full of just slamming us, really. And just, there was not one encouraging word, Mark.
I love the way you can remember the headline. Sugary sweets cause youth decay. That's so NME. I mean, I
think I've got it right.
But why didn't she like you? I mean, what were her reasons for saying it didn't work?
Well, I think just the way we presented ourselves. We were all wearing short skirts, bright colours. I think that particular night I may have been wearing some bright green shoes with some added green sequins round the top. It must have looked like we'd just gone in the play box sort of thing and picked out some things to sort of dress up in at nursery school. I mean, I can imagine this in her mind.
Yeah, yeah.
And also she thought that we were wearing short skirts and dressing up as children to attract the men. And sort of like that was the last thing that we would have thought we came across as. You know, it was just like this complete diametrically opposed viewpoint, you know, and sort of like there's nothing you can say to somebody who's got this fixed idea. You know, you have to be one thing or another.
It's just interesting how times have changed, because now, you know, girl writers tend to be incredibly enthusiastic and supportive of girl groups and girl artists.
I know.
Because they kind of, you know, there is a very strong sensation of the sisterhood. But the idea then that a girl writer would not have supported you does seem it seems appalling, actually.
It's just sort of like everyone's in competition with everybody else all the time, in that world anyway. And it was a sort of male-dominated world. But, and all the women who seemed to sort of come into it sort of, I guess, sort of took that on board and sort of maybe internalized the attitudes, you know, a bit, sort of just took it out on other women. I don't, because they could. I don't know. It's odd.
Yeah, that's true. It was phenomenally bitchy, wasn't it? Actually, that particular time. The other interesting thing is that it's about girls with guitars, I think, because girls playing keyboards, you know, girls just being in groups, you know, general singing in bands, whatever, fine. But the moment girls started playing guitars in the 70s, the 80s less so because there was less of it. In the 90s, it was the same, actually. Sleeper, Elastica, and all. They got really duffed up because there seemed to be a kind of male preserve, the idea that, you know, that men should be playing guitars and this is men's work, you know.
Yes.
Because I really felt there was, actually, that you got a really hard time for daring to play guitar, as did the Slits and as did the Raincoats to some extent.
Yes, and I mean,
Debs.
it did seem that everyone was looking for an excuse to put you down before you even started, but virtually, you know. I mean, if you were seen playing a guitar, you were then told you couldn't play it, you know, sort of like, oh, you were useless. Whereas we could play well enough to play our songs, and that's what most bands could do at that point. Most sort of punk bands. Like, you know, wasn't it meant to be a source of pride that a guitar solo was only one note?
Absolutely. On that note, remind me of the story when you appeared on Top of the Pops with Captain Sensible and DLT coming up to you, because that is another extraordinary moment. What happened then?
Oh, yes. We were standing behind this sort of thick curtain that you had to go through to go onto the set of Top of the Pops. And he sort of moseyed along while we were standing waiting to go on. And we were wearing sort of tops with grass skirts or something to do Happy Talk. And Rachel, our guitarist, was holding her guitar. And she was just standing there. And he said, hey, you know, show me you can play that sort of thing. Play me a G. No, she said, play me an F sharp or something. And she went, bring. And he said, that's a G. And she went, no, that's a G. And he was so angry, he just marched off because she showed him up.
It's so appalling, the idea that he should go. So DLT, actually. Pretty much on brand, I would have said. But
he
that
was
moment,
such
the moment where you appear on Top of the Pops, again, that Top of the Pops was such a huge program that we've interviewed loads of people on the podcast who talked about it being really genuinely life-changing. You know, you appear on Top of the Pops, all your friends see you, your family see you, people you were at school with, people you haven't seen for years see you, because everybody used to watch it. How was it after you'd appeared? It was with Captain Sensible, wasn't it, doing Happy Talk?
Yeah, no, it was because people, you got sort of letters from, like, I got one from my old boss at the job that I had after school, and she was sort of like really congratulatory. Our deputy headmaster sent a letter saying, "I've almost forgiven you two for being so late so often," sort of thing. So these people sort of come out of the woodwork, which is really thrilling sort of thing. But people sort of recognise you for a little bit, and then sort of like it all wears off because basically we were just sort of in the background. So, you know, it didn't last long for us, but for Captain, obviously, it was life-changing.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I was at Smash Hits at the time, and I can remember Captain's PR ringing us up and saying that the Captain and Dolly Mixture were about to go down Oxford Street on the back of a truck promoting, I think it might have been the follow-up single, What, actually, if I remember rightly. I can remember us going out of the office. It would have been me, probably, you know, Ian Birch and Neil Tennant, now in the Pet Shop Boys, and standing there watching you going by on this lorry.
Did you see it?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and we put a picture of it in the magazine, and, you know, I just remember it so well. And it was that what I remember most was that promotion was a really exciting thing. It was a really important thing, and it would have been such fun to be in bands when you could go down Oxford Street in the back of a truck. Now all you've got to do is sit at home and, I don't know, send a load of, you know, try and get something retweeted or whatever. But the idea that you could just do it, what was that like? Can you remember?
Oh, it was wonderful, and it was really, really good fun. It was to promote his album, and we had a megaphone. And it had the name of the album on a sort of sail at the top of this boat on the back of a truck. So we were sitting in a boat, and Captain was sort of standing up and waving at everybody. And we just sort of processed from sort of our Price Records in Kensington High Street all the way to Tottenham Court Road or Oxford Circus to another branch. And all the way along, we were just shouting sort of like, "Women and Captains first, buy the record," and "Captain here," and "buy the bleeding record," and sort of, "Ahoy, everybody." It was just, I mean, it was just glorious. It was such fun, and you feel confident because you're sitting in a boat dressed up as little mini captains. So sort of like you threw off all your cares, you know. It's great fun.
Must have been brilliant. That your appearance on Top of the Pops with him is sort of like one of the highlights, really, of the book. And after that, you can't really tell reading it why you don't carry on. But what was the reason why the group just didn't continue? Because you were in quite a strong position, weren't you?
Well, I think, I mean, we sort of, after Happy Talk, we sort of kept going for another 2 years. But we just sort of, we were going to get signed by A&M Records sort of late 1982, and they suddenly decided that they didn't want us and just suddenly told us in a phone call, or to somebody else who had to relay the news to us. And sort of that was a blow. We did a Fun Boy 3 tour. I mean, there's a lot that happened that obviously I couldn't get every single story in the book. But yeah. We did a Fun Boy 3 tour the following year, and that suddenly we felt like we'd sort of really matured as musicians, and our songs were better, and you know, maybe sort of we've gone on to a different level. But then the world was changing, and we weren't fashionable. Well, we were never fashionable, let's face it. Yeah. But we weren't interesting or amusing or fashionable or anything that was grabbing people's attention. And I always remember this guy, another journalist, sort of saying, "Oh, I tend to go clubbing these days. I don't go to gigs." So I was like, "Oh, Oh, oh dear. And I think that something different was taking over.
But also, everything changed very, very fast. You're talking about getting more mature in the songs and getting better playing your instruments. Maybe people just didn't really want that. Actually, maybe people just preferred Dolly Mixture when they couldn't play quite so well and they were less mature, and that was the essence of Dolly Mixture. I don't know. It's possible.
Well, I'm sure you could very well be right. And in a way, it could have been a sort of blaze of glory of 2 years and got very famous and burnt out and stuff. But we sort of went on a route of probably being too interested in what we were actually doing, actually searching to write the perfect song or whatever, and getting sort of very inward looking. And then eventually, of course, Captain and Rachel got together as a couple, and this isn't a spoiler because it's for the book. They got together and had a baby at the end of 1984, and we were just like, we knew it was done.
Yeah,
we were just grabbing at things, and
but also you talk about A&M and trying to sign you, and in fact, it wasn't really the age where the kind of big labels really work, because it just took them too long to make a decision. The Dolly Mixture suited DIY labels that will bang out a single within 2 weeks. It suited being on the Peel show. It suited doing this tour with the Jam and doing this tour with the Undertones or whatever, and everything just happening really, really fast because things just changed so fast. And suddenly it was synthesizers and pop music, and you probably just didn't fit in. But I mean, let's be honest, you had a really good innings. It was terrific. And it must have been fun looking back on it. It must have been fun to remember it all and write this book.
I think once I'd got over the torture of reading the diaries, and having to think about sort of like all these sort of excruciating sort of circumstances and boyfriends and all this sort of the sort of to go over the fun bits and to think about how we stuck together. Obviously there were times when we fell out, but we did actually stick together, and there was. I think really, I really loved treasuring how much there was something that we really loved about doing the group, even though it was sort of like really difficult and we were always fighting somebody or being misunderstood. So there was so much of that. It's I guess it's a bit of a luxury being able to write about it. And somebody saying they'll put it out.
Well, I thought it was a really interesting story. I thought it really captured the time. I thought it was really, really charming and really funny. And immensely nostalgic. And I would recommend it very strongly to anybody listening or watching. Yeah, it's called Teenage Daydream, We Are the Girls Who Play in a Band by Debsey Wykes. Thanks so much for talking to us, Debsey. Brilliant.